So the next article I wanted to take a look at is entitled Rick Scarborough Warns About the Dangers of Allowing Children to Believe in Santa. I found this one particularly interesting because Jehovah's Witnesses are so opposed to Christmas and Santa, and they have their own reasons for hating him. So let's read the article and see if their reasons, if Rick Scarborough's reasons, are in line with Jehovah's Witnesses. The article is on Right Wing Watch by Kyle Mantilla. It says, radical right-wing pastor Rick Scarborough used this week's episode of his Mixing Church and State God's Way podcast to warn Christian parents about the dangers of allowing their children to believe in Santa Claus. Scarborough said that when his children were young, it was fun for them to believe in Santa, but as they got older, Scarborough began to struggle with it because he knew that sooner rather than later, I'd have to confess that we'd all been lying. Fascinating. So there's a clip that goes along with this. Let's give it a listen and see what he had to say.
We obviously tried to build a strong Christian home with extended family who enjoyed playing up Santa Claus in the minds of our very impressionable children. And at first, my wife enjoyed playing the game. I admitted to our people that it was very enjoyable to witness the way our children's minds would wrap around the fantasy of old Kris Kringle as he magically appeared at the home of every child in the world, knowing exactly what each child deserved and wanted for Christmas. But as our children got older, they began asking questions that were more difficult to answer, like, how can Santa be in every store we enter? And how can Santa go to every home in the world in one night? And how can he carry so many gifts? And where did he get all those gifts? We knew the stock answers that we were to give, but as the children got older, they asked harder questions. And then there was the certainty that we would never pull this off ultimately. That really bothered me as a father and a Christian pastor.
Okay, so the guy has an issue with lying to his kids. Now, I understand. I've had an issue with lying to my kid about that too. And that's why I never did. Never lied to her about it. Never told her that Santa was real. Not until she realized that he wasn't. Then I started fucking with her, oh, he totally is, but her mom, in my case, really wanted her to believe in it. Just felt like it was like a childhood thing that she should have. And that's something that I didn't have at all. I wasn't allowed to believe in Santa at all. I wasn't allowed to celebrate Christmas or any of that shit. So I kept my mouth shut through it. And just let her believe it, but didn't challenge her, didn't, suggest that maybe he's not, didn't suggest that maybe he is. I was basically totally neutral on the issue for the majority of her childhood because I didn't want to lie to her. That was the only reason ultimately. But I see the point behind the childhood whimsy and the magical fun, just having fun with family and believing that all these presents come from Santa and all of that stuff. It didn't take her long to realize that Santa wasn't real. And when she straight up asked me, I said, no, he's not real. Now, who else do you think is not real? What other characters have you been told are real that may not be? And she was like, the Tooth Fairy? And I was like, yeah. And she was like, the Easter Bunny? I said, keep going. And she said, God? Eventually, that does seem to be kind of the logical end to it, right? Like, you're telling your kids about all of these mythical creatures that do all of these crazy things, like take your teeth at night and hide eggs in various places and bring presents to you and shit like that. And created the earth in 6,000 years. All these weird magical creatures you're talking about. It seems logical to me that the logical end to realizing that all of the others are fake is you're going to realize that the first one is fake too. That being said, that doesn't always tend to be the case. Kids don't usually question whether or not God is real after they question if Santa is real. That doesn't tend to happen in reality, like in practice. In some cases it does, but if the adults believe it, then the kids usually believe it. They say the best liars believe their own lies. If the parents are saying that God is real and they truly believe it, then the kids likely will too. If the parents are saying that Santa is real but they don't really believe it, the kids are going to catch on to it eventually. Anyway, let's keep listening to this guy and see what else he says.
I knew that sooner rather than later I'd have to confess that we had all been lying all the while. And here's where I decided that I wouldn't continue to embellish what I knew to be false. At the very time they were reaching for the age of accountability, around 7 and 8 years of age, when a child can be saved.
Okay, let me just pause there real quick. I find it fascinating that he said around 7 or 8 years old is the age of accountability, quote unquote. That's kind of a Mormon saying, isn't it? Isn't that like a Mormon thing? The age of accountability is 8 years old in that case. That's when they need to basically get heavily involved in the church, get baptized, and all of that other shit. Because they can go to hell, or they won't make it into heaven. Pretty much, or they won't make it into super VIP heaven or whatever the hell it is with Mormons if they don't go through the whole ritual and the whole process after turning 8 years old. So Mormons have this whole belief system about the great apostasy, where there was no established church and nobody was going to heaven. So what happened to the kids during the great apostasy? If they were under 8 years old, then they'll be fine. They were not accountable for their actions up to that point. That's what this guy's talking about. I find it really interesting that he's buying into that whole age of accountability thing. Anyway, let's keep listening to what he said.
We discovered that the one who'd been encouraging them to believe in Jesus was the same one who lied about Santa. That pierced my heart to the core as a father. I challenged our people in the message to consider how many of our children walked away from their faith, and could it not be that we were planting the seeds of doubt in their young minds when we lied about Santa Claus?
Honestly, dude, it's just fun, you know? It's just whimsical fucking childhood fun. Seriously. I feel like he's reading into this a little bit too much. And he's going to address that in just a minute. Some of his churchgoers disagree with him and say you're getting a little bent out of shape over something stupid. But honestly, he is. And I've felt that way since long before I heard him talking about this. I've felt that way since Jehovah's Witnesses were giving these arguments. They give the exact same arguments about Santa. It gets deeper, so let's keep listening.
After all, if you truly look at what we proclaim about Jesus, about the sovereignty of our Lord, and about who God is, it takes a leap of faith to believe it. If the authority figure in your life has been lying for years about a Santa Claus figure who has all the attributes of a God, how can you really trust him to be telling you the truth now about the revelation of the God-man?
That's fascinating to me. I find that fascinating. The fact that he said that it takes a leap of faith to believe in God, that tells me that he probably knows that the evidence for God is just as solid as the evidence for Santa. And it probably started to get to him a little bit. That's my guess. I'm starting to wonder if Santa was shaking his faith in God. And that's why he's going through this whole sermon. But every single fucking Christmas, there's always some asshole out there saying we shouldn't celebrate Christmas because Santa is evil, blah, blah, blah. Let's keep listening.
You are listening and feeling increasingly defensive about Santa. Please let me finish the message which I shared with our congregation, who largely felt the same way you likely feel right now when they heard it the first time. Some interesting facts about Santa to consider. First, his name is spelled with the exact same letters that spell Satan.
Oh, please. Really? Is that really the argument that you're going with? This is ridiculous. Listen to this, dude. He probably doesn't realize how embarrassing he is, in all seriousness. He probably, if he realized how embarrassing he was being right now, he would be red as a strawberry because of this. This is the most ridiculous argument you could possibly give. And Jehovah's Witnesses give it shamelessly, too. They will go out there and tell you, you know that if you move the letters around in the name Santa, then it spells Satan. Who fucking cares? What does that have to do with anything? Well, let's call him St. Nicholas then. How about that? Or why don't we just call him Nick or Nicky? Does that make you happier? Why do we have to call him Santa? How ridiculous is this? They act like somebody came up and planned this. Like, you know what? I'm Satan, and I'm gonna get people to celebrate Christmas in secret ways by naming the character of Christmas after myself, except moving the letters around. How fucking ridiculous is this? Give me a break. All right, let's keep listening.
Finish the message, which I shared with our congregation, who largely felt the same way you likely feel right now when they heard it the first time. Some interesting facts about Santa to consider. First, his name is spelled with the exact same letters that spell Satan. Coincidence? Perhaps. Except I do not believe that anything with God is accidental or coincidental. Perhaps you're thinking, well, preacher, you're way up too tight about this. Well, just continue to listen and let's think it through.
Okay, so he's given his weakest arguments up to this point, I guess, is kind of what he's implying with that last sentence that he said. You're getting a little too uptight about this, preacher, and his response is, well, let's just sit down and keep listening and see where it goes from here. And he does have some other interesting arguments to present. I will give him that. Honestly, like I said before, this is just childhood whimsy. This is just fun shit. You can't be all bent out of shape and uptight about every little thing. That's what I like to call putting extreme or exaggerated importance on events or ideas. It's a point that I added to the bite model, basically. And this is a perfect example. Jehovah's Witnesses don't want to celebrate Christmas because the name Santa can be rearranged to spell Satan. Jehovah's Witnesses don't want to celebrate Christmas because of some weak perceived roots to paganism, like some ill-defined paganism. What is paganism anyway? Seriously. I mean, we have modern day paganism. That's a different thing. They're not saying that. Jehovah's Witnesses are saying old school 2,000 to 5,000 year old pagan religions created the Christmas tree. In reality, this is just placing absurd importance on some trivial thing. It does not matter. Anyway, let's keep listening to the guy and see what else he has to say about this.
Preacher, you're way up too tight about this. Well, just continue to listen and let's think it through. Secondly, Santa is given all the attributes of God. He is omniscient. He knows everything that every child is doing. He's omnipresent, allowing him to be in every store simultaneously around the world in a single night. And he's omnipotent. There's no toy that he cannot create and provide out of thin air if he decides the child is worthy of it.
Okay, interesting argument. So he's saying that they modeled Santa after Jesus, basically, right? I would venture to guess that they probably modeled his characteristics like that after just a similar archetype. I mean, Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader have a lot of similarities to the storytelling in the Bible. A lot of stories are told in very similar ways. They have been for thousands of years. That's just how it works. Noah's Ark is almost a blow-by-blow description of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Like, a lot of these stories just have similar timelines and plots with names changed and small details changed. That's just how fucking story writing works. So I'm not really buying that argument. Let's keep listening.
The only problem with this is it's all a lie. And that allows for a transition to the most indicting part of the Santa myth. The entire case for Santa is built upon a works foundation.
That is interesting to me, okay? So what does he mean by that? It's built on a works foundation. Jehovah's Witnesses have this disagreement, basically, with a lot of different religions out there. The Bible is a big fucking book, right? And you can find a verse in there to back up basically anything you want it to say. You want it to defend murder? It's in there. You want it to condemn murder? It's in there. You can find anything in the Bible. It contradicts itself left and right. Because at its core, really, the Bible isn't a single book. It's a collection of like 66 different books, written at different times by different people across thousands of years. You can find anything in the Bible that you want to find to defend a position. You want to find justification to love people from the LGBT community? It's there. You want to find justification to hate them? That's there too. It's all there. When you get down to it, that's at the core of what he's saying right now. It's a works-based system. So Jehovah's Witnesses have this belief that faith without works is dead. That's a direct Bible quote. But this guy apparently believes that you are saved not by works, but by grace alone. That's another verse from the Bible. So who's right? The Bible says both things. They contradict each other. Which one is correct? You can go about trying to rule it out and say, well, this one was said later, and this one was said by somebody of higher stature in the church, and things like that. But ultimately, the Bible contradicts itself on this. So is it works-based or is it faith-based? Jehovah's Witnesses use this belief that it's works-based to try to force people to go knocking on doors. And they tell them, if you don't knock on doors, there's a pretty solid chance that you aren't going to make it through Armageddon. God's going to take you out when the time comes if you didn't honestly put your best effort into trying to spread the good word. So I guess this guy believes that you're saved not by works, but by grace alone, or by faith alone, I think, depending on your Bible translation. Let's keep listening.
Foundation. He's keeping a list of who's naughty and nice, and he checks it twice. And only if a child is truly deserving according to their works do they merit the gift or gifts they requested, teaching a works system. This is antithetical to the gospel narrative.
I love it how he's basically calling out capitalism right now. Isn't that like the definition of capitalism? It's like supposed to be like a meritocracy. Like you work hard and you're rewarded with money. That's the premise. Obviously, it doesn't work that way in the U.S. at all. But that's what it's all about. And this guy is an extreme right-wing pastor who believes that the church should be all up in the state in every way. And he's sitting here basically saying capitalism is evil pretty much, right? I think that's fucking hilarious. When you like zoom back and take a look, like an overhead view of what some of these people have to say, look at their belief systems and look for holes in the cohesion, you find them everywhere. The belief systems that these people spread aren't cohesive in any way, at least because the Bible isn't cohesive. Like I said, it's 66 different books written by different people at different times in history over thousands of years. It contradicts itself left and right. Naturally, any belief system you built upon the Bible wasn't going to have cohesion anyways. This guy has some interesting justifications for his beliefs, but it all falls to pieces once you start poking holes in it.